And thank you so much, everyone, to be here today. And thank you for coming and join us in this wonderful journey. So, I would like to invite our wonderful friends, Vincent, who is one of the members of our Spirit Center, to start and to do the beginning prayer. And after that, Jim Story, my dear friend and brother and everything else, to come and conduct the event, be our host. Thank you so much.
Okay. Dear God, thank you for bringing us together today. Thank you for bringing in all our good spirit friends and all spirits who need to be here today. We thank you for the protection and the love and the grace that you give to us, the love that we have with our friends and families, and the hope and the protection that you give to us every day. We ask that you open our hearts, our eyes, our ears today, and help us to bring in all the goodness that you have for us today, so that we may take it in and live it in the coming days. So be it.
So be it.
Great, thank you so much, Vincent. According to the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, after cancer and heart disease, suicide accounts for more years of life lost than any other cause of death. These were statistics from 2012. To put a slightly different spin on it, if I may, the economic cost of suicide death in the US was estimated in 2005 to be $34.6 billion annually. When adjusted for inflation alone, this number rises to $42.2 billion. With the burden of suicide falling most heavily on adults of working age, the cost to the economic results almost entirely from lost wages and work productivity. So how can I actually put a dollar value on this very serious and somber subject? The point is, suicide affects everyone. So let me put a different spin on it. The first time I thought about suicide, I was 14 years old. It's hard to believe that a 14-year-old boy, what could be so serious that a 14-year-old boy could possibly think about suicide? But I remember it as if it happened yesterday. I remember feeling the sense of despair, of loss, of just utter non-control over what was happening. So isolated, so by myself, that it was a possibility. But fortunately, I grew up very close to my father. Now, my father was a farmer, mind you, growing up in a small town in Nebraska. I was the middle child, the boy, between two sisters, right? So at that time, back in the 1960s, I'm kind of giving away my age a little bit here. Back in the 1960s, the girls were in the kitchen. The boys were in the garage. I hated it. But I learned from my father, who was a spiritual man for a farmer. I learned from him that through spirituality, and he believed in the teachings of Christ, he read the Bible, but he also read Edgar Cayce. He was very well read. So he had a very broad, very horizontal view of what exactly, spiritualism is, spirituality. And I remember in those days out in the garage, which, oh my God, it was so hot in the summer, and it was so cold in the winter, and I hated every minute of it. But what he would tell me is that he would say, Jimmy, suicide is not a way out. People who commit suicide are at a loss. He believed very heavily in reincarnation. very heavily that suicide as a way out doesn't work. Because what happens is you come back. And you have to do it all over again. And I thought, well, I don't want to do that. So I learned a very important lesson. Now, I have struggled with depression and severe anxiety for most of my life and have had to deal with that. So this topic is very near and dear. And I think that probably all of us in this room have had to deal with or have dealt with this topic in one form or another. There are people that we walk with, people that we work with, people that are our friends that we don't know what is behind that mask. We all wear that mask, right? So what we hope to do today, through a series of speakers, is to present the arguments for education, awareness, being able to identify if someone is in crisis. That's a start. Now I have a graph that actually shows the trend of suicides over the last 20 years. And guess what? It flatlines. I don't mean that as a pun intended, by the way. It flatlines. It went up in the 1980s. It went down 1999, 2000. And guess what happened during the economic crisis of 2007, 2008? It started to go up. Bottom line is, it's flatlining. And what does that tell you? We have a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do. So with that preamble, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Now this man I've known for quite a while. I'm actually going to read what is on the poster here, because it's quite interesting. Eddison Cornwell is one of the founders of the Long Island Spiritist group, who is sponsoring this event today. So Eddison Cornwell, throughout life's journey, there are many forks in the road for Eddison Cornwell. The moment he read the Spirit's book was one of those, and he has not looked back since. A member of the Long Island Spiritist Doctrine group, he has accepted the great challenge and rewards of having the spiritual life in the material world. And it has been a source of inspiration and hope for the future. Ladies and gentlemen, Eddison Cornwell.
All right, thank you so much. That's a great introduction. Do I need this to, can you hear me without it, or? Yeah, you probably need it, right? All right, we want to thank you all for coming today. This is a very serious and hard subject to talk about, and also this is our second annual suicide prevention seminar. We had one last year. Such an important thing to talk about. Certainly the direction that we've taken here is always directed by the good spirits. You know, that when you have a seminar that's an annual thing, that's conducted not just here but also in the spirit world, and they collaborate with us on that. So my presentation today talks about what happens to a person who commits suicide, not just in the spirit world, not so much the focus what happens to them in the spirit world, but what happens to them when you have, in the next life, when you come back, and lives after that. So also, just a reminder, one of the reasons why we decided to do this, presentation on suicide is because in collaboration, although they don't know that we're collaborating with them, but there is the Long Island Suicide Prevention, and they're having their 7th annual symposium on December 3rd. So if anybody's interested in going to that, there are a lot of interesting sessions. Again, they cover the medical side, the psychological side of suicide. And in collaboration with that, we're looking to add the spiritual perspective. We did actually last year notify them that we wanted to be part of their presentation, but they were not willing, to have us. They're not ready for that, so, why push it? But we're collaborating with them, And we're also advertising for them, saying that this is, you need to have the medical and the spiritual combined together. All right. Certainly, when you think about the connections between the medical field and the spiritual side of it, there is always a collaboration that goes on. And, but one without the other, you can't have. It's like if you have a physical disease and you only pray to get better, you're not going to just get better. It helps, but it's not enough. You need to combine the two. And so, medical treatment, such as the use of antipsychotic and antidepressant drugs, can do much on the cellular level, but it does not address inner causes. Personality is not a product of the internal work of the physical body, but the product of the chemistry of the mind. Medicine will continue to invent thousands of ways to help the body that is medically out of balance, but it is up to us to practice the medicine of the soul. And of course, I think that we've seen that there is a slow progression of the link between spirituality and medicine over the years. I think that you're seeing that more and more often, that there is a benefit to prayer combined with medicine. And this is right from the University of Maryland's Medical Center on their website. They say that spiritual practices tend to improve coping skills and social support, foster feelings of optimism and hope, promote healthy behavior, reduce feelings of depression and anxiety, and encourage a sense of relaxation. By alleviating stressful feelings and promoting healing wounds, spirituality can positively influence immune, cardiovascular, heart and blood vessels, hormonal and nervous systems. So, of course, I mean, that makes sense to all of us because we know the benefits of prayer. I mean, we've all experienced that. We've all seen what it does in our lives. But as we move forward, certainly science, medicine, religion, all need to come together to one point. So, there is a great challenge in life. And I have this quote on our website, and I have had it in the house because it's really meaningful. From Martin Luther King Jr., the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy. And as we've studied Spiritism, we know that really what makes you progress are all the trials that you have to undergo in life. Those are the things that really push you to the limit, that make you who you are, that shape your spirit. And as you can see, sometimes we give up so close, so easy to give up, so hard to keep going. But what are the benefits if you keep going? A lot of times you're so close and you don't know how close you are. That's why suicide is such an unfortunate thing, because you could be so close to getting help and you give up right at that moment. So our challenge to people is keep going. Don't give up. Find your inner strength. And of course, we can't do a suicide prevention seminar without talking about some of the statistics, and they are really kind of depressing when you look at the numbers, and it kind of puts in perspective exactly what we're dealing with here. So, according to the latest numbers, over 1 million people die by suicide worldwide each year. 1 million people. The global suicide rate is 16 per 100,000 population. On average, one person dies by suicide every 40 seconds somewhere in the world. Yeah, that's every 40 seconds someone's dying, killing themselves, taking their lives. 1.8% of worldwide deaths are suicides. And global suicide rates have increased 60% in the past 45 years. So like he was saying, Jim was saying that there is a stabilization, but there's always peaks and valleys. And it seems to be that it continues to be a viable option for a lot of people to take their lives. That's why it's so important that we all play our role to try to educate people on how much damage is done, not just to the people left behind, but to the spirit themselves. So why do people take their lives? There are so many reasons. I mean, to go into all of them, it would, because everybody's different. Everybody has their own role to play in the world. But looking at it from the spiritual perspective, why do people take their lives? Most of them, it's this tie to the material body. It's this illusion that the material world presents to us. And it's addictions and mental illnesses, rebelliousness, and this moral erosion that we see in the modern day culture. Misinformation about the immortality of the spiritual being. This idea of you only live once, this YOLO thing. If you ever heard the kids talk about YOLO, you only live once. That's a horrible thing to have kids believing, because if you only live once, what is the point of even trying to be a spiritual person or be a good person for that matter? So, also we need to understand that we have this heritage, the law of reincarnation, that we have a past, that we have had many successive lives and done horrible things in our past that we need to atone for now, here and now. So whatever you're going through, if you believe in God strong enough, you'll believe that whatever's happening is for a reason. And again, also we have a lack of support. A lot of people feel, like Jimmy said, all on his own. Nobody to talk to, nobody to help, but he had his father there. You need to have support. We all need support. We need people to talk to in times of crisis to get us through it. That's where the Spirit Center comes in. That's where your friends come in, your family, the people that you trust. And education. Education is such an important thing too. We need to always look in every direction. If we can't find what we're looking for, keep looking. Educate not just our minds, educate our spirits. For a lot of us, a lot of times it's lack of strength that keeps us from continuing to move on from the suffering in our lives. It takes a lot, but you have to push through, because I've been there. I've experienced it myself, and the suffering seems like it's going to last forever, but it is a temporary thing. All right, so let's talk about the law of reincarnation. So the inequalities of life are explained by different situations, occupied by souls at their infinite degrees of evolution. The destiny of the being is determined by the development through the ages of a long series of cause and effect produced by their acts. Each one of us brings the seeds of our past from beyond the tomb to the newborn soul. We weave, thread by thread, the fabric of our own destiny. The law of justice is indeed the law of harmony. It determines the consequences of acts which in our freedom we commit. Of course, we have the free will to always decide what we're doing. No matter what level of education you are spiritually, you always have the right to decide for yourself what you want. That's free will. That's what God allows us to have. The path that we choose in life. We've already traveled through many lifetimes, successive lifetimes of suffering. And as we move along, we acquire a certain knowledge that we take with us into the next life. Some people, it takes so many lifetimes to progress. Others progress more quickly. It's all up to the individual. individual responsibility. Thank you. So the natural laws are really what we're talking about when we say natural laws. We're talking about God's laws. Each of us has their duties and a mission to fulfill on earth. You may not realize it, but you are here for a purpose. Trials to endure for our own good and our own improvement. To seek to evade those and to liberate ourselves before our time from human suffering is to violate this natural law. And every violation of the law brings down a terrible reaction upon the violator. The spirit will be obliged to again undergo the self-same trials from which by death it thought it could escape, and which its past had occasioned. It will have to endure these under worse conditions to retrace step by step the rocky path, and for that to still undergo a more painful incarnation than that from which it sought to flee. Oh, thank you. Oh, okay, is it working? Okay. All right, thank you. That's better. So, these trials that we always think that, people who commit suicide think they're going to avoid suffering by taking their lives. And that's not the case, because the suffering in the spirit world is horrible. And the suffering that you will have in your next life is going to be much worse. The trials that you're going to undergo more difficult. You compound your problems by taking your life. And that's the natural laws of God. Each person according to what they have done. What we have done in our past reverberates in the present, providing either the means or the difficulties within our human experiences, rewarding our good efforts and correcting our evil impulses. The laws of genetics work involving our skin and eye color and the physical structure of our bodies, but only as basic material for the construction of the new residence of the soul. The finishing work will be done due to the nature of the spirit, according to who you really are as the spirit. The material image of the various degrees of the soul's purification can be compared to the juice of the vine. It contains the liquor called spirits or alcohol, but it is weakened by the large quantity of foreign elements that alter its essence. It only reaches absolute perfection after several distillations, each removing a portion of the impurities. And that's from Allan Kardec in the Spirit's book. So we really are what we are, and our true essence, okay, you have to always remember that we are all sons and daughters of God, first and foremost. So as daughters and sons of God, we have a responsibility to Him to be the best that we can possibly be at all times. It's not easy because the world is full of trials that we must undergo. But it is up to us, always, to continue to push ourselves forward. And this is from Heaven and Hell. Okay, and this talks about, because there's a whole chapter of communications with suicides in Heaven and Hell. And it's a real dark chapter in that book. If you've read it, it's hard to go through because you can just imagine what some of these spirits are going through, reliving their suicide over and over again. Even though this presentation is more of a focus on what happens after the reincarnations, we have to kind of give a sense of what happens in the spirit world to these lost spirits who are in the dark, who have no idea what's happening to them. And this is right from the book, Chapter 5, Communications with Spirits Who Committed Suicide. One particular communication, I'm sorry, the words are so small, I have to keep getting closer to it. One particular communication is with the spirit of a 67-year-old sailor whose habits of drunkenness had led him to commit suicide by throwing himself from the tower of Francis I on July 22nd, 1857. According to Allan Kardec's medium guide, the spirit was a poor wretch who had to undergo the trial of poverty upon the earth, but he felt disgust with life, his courage failed him, and instead of looking upwards, as he should have done, he threw himself off the tower and gave himself up to his addiction. This man, who has been dead now for 6 years, still sees himself falling from the tower and being dashed to pieces on the stones. How much longer will his agony continue? He knows not, and this uncertainty increases his anguish. Through suicide, we only escape a minor ill to fall into trouble 100 times more severe. So that's what happens in the spirit world when you kill yourself. I mean, those are the things that happen. And if you want, really the best book to see examples of what it's like for the suicide in the spirit world is Memoirs of a Suicide. That book describes perfectly what it's like. Suicide is always an extreme and evasive gesture due to undesirable circumstances. Facing these once more in a new existence, they could develop this evasive tendency again and relapse into self-annihilation. The cumulative evils that proceed from suicide will result in expiatory reincarnations marked by serious mental or physical deficiencies that will over time help them to overcome this evasive tendency to take their own lives. Suicide is probably the most irrational of all acts. If the potential suicide paused for a few moments to ponder on the religious aspects of the act and the problems they will face, they would not dare to commit it. So again, as we have these acquired tendencies in our spiritual nature, each existence is another opportunity to filter out these bad behaviors. And it's only through the good work that you can acquire a more elevated spirit. We can hasten or slow our own process depending on what we do while we live in this material life. And of course, there are future consequences that we're going to have if we choose to commit suicide, because we're going to damage not just our physical body, obviously, when you kill yourself, but also your spiritual body, which will, in terms later, affect your next physical body that you'll take. So the physical body acts like a waste valve for spiritual impurities. In this way, there will soon be a condition where it will be the responsibility of the suicide to be reincarnated for these necessary readjustments in yet another difficult expiatory experience, where the paraspiritual lesions will resonate within their physical body, reproducing various inevitable illnesses and sufferings. The paraspirit is the form that the physical shape takes. The damage caused by committing suicide will be reflected in the new physical body, creating various illnesses corresponding to the type of aggression the individual committed against themselves. So it reverberates in the paraspirit, which is the link between the physical body and the soul. So when you damage yourself, the physical body in a suicide, that will also reverberate into the next lifetime, leaving an impression. The paraspirit carries that impression, and when you're reborn, you're going to have some of these damages that you created to yourself. And we see numerous of examples of that. So, this is a quote by Dr. Ian Stevenson, who, he was a professor who studied the idea of reincarnation. He approached it, from the medical aspect, and he says he's in his studies, in cases in which the related previous personality had committed suicide, the subject has shown an inclination to contemplative and threatened suicide. So a person who commits suicide in the next life has a predisposition to kill themselves again. This is a concurrent theme for people who commit suicide. They will feel, because of course God is always fair and just, so he's going to put you in a situation where you're going to want to maybe take your life again and to see if you can overcome that. Chico Xavier says that the suicide will take 200 years to recuperate. Chico Xavier, the great Brazilian medium. 200 years to recuperate with the need for one or more migrations into a physical body. It is in these incarnations that the spirit will either submit to subsequent suicides or overcome the circumstances. So after a suicide, it usually takes 2 lifetimes to overcome that damage. And again, you'll feel in that next lifetime the want to try to kill yourself again. I mean, that's something that you're going to want to do, so you're going to have to overcome that. So the damage is really, really intense. And this quote from Aristotle is, I think it's perfect. To run away from trouble is a form of cowardness. And while it is true that the suicide braves death, he does it not for some noble object, but to escape some ill. And that is the reason why people kill themselves, to escape, to not have to suffer. And it's, I have a hard time understanding how someone would rather take their lives than face suffering. I mean, that doesn't, if you're not scared of death, but you're afraid to suffer, a lot of us are here to suffer. It's part of what makes us who we are, builds our characters. And so in that vein, talking about what the spiritual damage actually is from suicide, violence, cruelty, murder, and suicide produce results which return birth after birth on the material body in form of nervous maladies, deformity, and madness. Now, also, we have to keep in mind that when let's say we know people who have major problems, deformities, if they're mental illness, we're not ever to judge somebody. We are not in a position to look at them and say, oh, you must be a suicide, or you must be this, or we're here to help people always and never judge anybody. So we have to, and every case is always different when it comes to like suicides. We don't know people's past. We don't know their backstories. We're not one to have to judge them in any way. So we're only here to offer our assistance, our help, in every way that we can. That's what being a good person is. That's what we've learned in Spiritism, that we are here to help people, never to judge them in any way. And also, Ian Stevenson, he goes into a lot of depth on these like birthmarks that, he studied hundreds and hundreds and thousands of cases of children all over the world who he believed were reincarnations of people, and he studied the birthmarks on their bodies. So a lot of these correspond to the damage that they did to their bodies in the last visit on the planet. So he says, in cases in which the related previous personality had committed suicide, the subject has shown an inclination to contemplate and threaten suicide again and again. So again, that's a common theme with people who have committed suicide coming back in the next lifetime. They have a predisposition almost to kill themselves as a test. Okay, so this spirit-body correlation that Dr. Ian Stevenson was talking about, and again, Dr. Ian Stevenson, he was a Canadian-born U.S. psychiatrist. He worked in the University of Virginia School of Medicine for 50 years in the head of the department. And again, like I said, he studied all these reincarnation patterns. So one of his books that says is about where reincarnation and biology intersect. And he spent a long time writing it, over 20 years of research. And some of the things that he came across as he was studying was that when birthmarks and wounds experienced in claimed past lives are correlated, the evidence is generally found in the memories of the past life means of death, or through other informants whose knowledge of these wounds, or in the strongest cases, through medical records made at the time of death. So a lot of these deformities that the people had, or the birthmarks, mirrored what they did to kill themselves in their former life. So there's a connection between the one life to the next on the physical bodies that leaves this imprint. 6 cases are described where birthmarks in 2 places on the child correlate with the entrance and exit wounds associated with the death of the previous personality. So humans demonstrate the capability to create changes in their own bodies, as in the case of stigmata or a certain hypnotically induced phenomenon. And about 35% of the cases demonstrate a phobia, which is almost related to the mode of death in the previous life. And we've seen numerous examples of that, where people talk about reincarnation when 4th of July, when a kid hears the explosions from the fireworks, and it takes him back to the actual events that in his preceding life, where he died on a battlefield. So it leaves such an impression in the spirit. There's such a correlation from one life to the next, and so many examples of that. And again, just quickly, a lot of these things that, like birth defects that people have or illnesses, can be a correlation to their suicide methods that they used in their previous lives. Post-suicide reincarnations prove the ultimate connection between cause and effect. The birth defects inherited by the returning suicide match the suicide method used precisely. So a person who was damaged their head in any way, like either shooting themselves or stabbing themselves, is usually there's a high currency of Down syndrome, mental illness associated in the next life. Of course, if you shoot yourself in the chest, you come back to the next life, you're going to have heart failure, all kinds of heart problems, disease. And there's a whole bunch of them hanging by the neck. Of course, you would have problems in your throat area. And these are all connected to the chakras in your body. Because when you do commit suicide, you do damage those chakras, which correspond into the next life. If a person who would drown themselves or suffocate themselves in the next life are going to have some sort of pneumatic breathing problems. Death by alcohol, again, fetal alcohol syndromes. Jumping from a height, shattering bones, then they have bone problems in the next life. So that shows you the correlation and how deeply rooted this is, that you would actually, in your next life, have all these physical ailments because in your previous life, you created that yourself. And now you've got a body that you deserve to have. So really, really what our responsibility is, and the mission of Spiritism, is to make us think about life, making us aware that we are here on earth not for a holiday. You're not here you're not supposed to be here to, go to a big party. You're here to work and to learn. The fundamental objective of our passage through this world is our own evolution, and we are responsible for that. Pain is redemptive. Problems become incentives. Difficulties become challenges. Crises are tests. They evaluate our learning. In summation, we have been granted these blessed opportunities by God in favor of our growth as an immortal spirit. Thank you very much. These are the books that all this came from. Thank you very much.